Picture a boneyard stretching along a riverbank. Thousands of mammoth bones, tusks as tall as a person, and skulls the size of boulders. This isn't some natural disaster site. This is Berelekh, and it's one of dozens of similar sites across the Ice Age world where humans systematically processed mammoths over centuries. Dating shows humans and mammoth remains overlap here for roughly 700 to 800 years, not a single catastrophe. While some bone concentrations are natural, Berelekh has multiple archaeological indicators, hearths, carved ivory, and processing tools scattered among the remains of at least 156 individual mammoths. But here's the question that's keeping archaeologists awake at night. If humans were this efficient at mammoth hunting, what really caused their extinction? To understand the scale of this relationship, we need to look at what archaeologists call the Mammoth Supermarket of the Ice Age. At the Austrian site of Langmannersdorf, archaeologists found something that changed everything we thought about Ice Age survival. 5 complete mammoth carcasses butchered with surgical precision 25,000 years ago. The cut marks on these bones tell a story that goes far beyond simple hunting. These mammoths weren't just food sources. They were walking department stores packed with everything humans needed to survive the most brutal climate our species had ever faced. Across Europe and Siberia, mammoth processing sites reveal an operation that seems impossible for small hunter-gatherer groups. We're talking about locations where hundreds of mammoths were systematically butchered over centuries. At Krakow, Spadzista in Poland, researchers found stone tools embedded directly in mammoth bones. Clear proof these weren't scavenged deaths, but active kills. The scale is staggering when you realize each site processed tons of mammoth material year after year. Every part of a mammoth served a crucial survival function. The dense meat and fat provided concentrated calories equivalent to thousands of pounds of plant foods that simply didn't exist during Arctic winters. Thick hides became walls for shelters that could withstand sub-zero temperatures and howling winds. Dense mammoth fur created insulation layers that meant the difference between life and death when temperatures dropped to -40 degrees. Ivory tusks were carved into tools, weapons, and even sewing needles. Evidence of this sophisticated ivory working appears at sites like Langmannersdorf and Berelekh. A single adult mammoth offered a very large cache of meat, fat, hide, and ivory, enough to sustain and supply a mobile group for prolonged periods, which is why these animals were such strategic targets. When vegetation disappeared under ice and snow for 8 months of the year, mammoth fat became the primary energy source, keeping human communities alive. For many Arctic groups, mammoths supplied food fuel and materials that, together with fire, made survival possible. Without mammoths, human expansion into the Arctic would have been impossible. But the archaeological evidence reveals something more complex than random hunting. The bone beds tell a forensic story that reveals the true scope of this relationship. At Berelekh, the evidence becomes undeniable. The bones tell a story that would make a forensic investigator's blood run cold. Systematic disarticulation, strategic transport, and evidence of blowfly processing that reveals the true scope of human mammoth exploitation. For decades, scientists assumed these massive bone beds were natural accumulations where mammoths died during harsh winters or got trapped in river crossings. The Berelekh site shatters that comfortable theory with clear evidence of human mammoth processing operations spanning centuries. Radiocarbon dates cluster between roughly 12,500 and 11,814 years BP, with peaks at approximately 12.4K, 12.2K, and 11.8K that perfectly overlap with human occupation periods over 700 years. This isn't coincidence. The timing shows deliberate, repeated human activity at this location. Between the scattered mammoth remains, archaeologists found hearths, worked ivory tools, and the telltale signs that bones were selectively transported to the site rather than dying naturally in place. The discovery of Chin-Dedien projectile points and a 35-inch ivory shaft proves sophisticated tool-making technology was being used specifically on mammoth materials. These weren't crude choppers, but precision instruments designed for processing massive carcasses efficiently. The ivory shaft alone represents hours of skilled craftsmanship carved from a single tusk with intricate detail work. Forensic evidence shows bones were systematically defleshed and processed. Blowfly pupae found in skull cavities indicate carcasses had been defleshed before burial rather than natural death. Higher value mammoth parts like ivory tusks and marrow-rich bones were transported to Berelekh, while less useful skeletal elements were left behind at kill sites, proving selective human decision-making in what materials deserved the effort of transport. Tusk fragments and worked ivory show a local industry for ivory production. Similar human-mammoth interaction patterns are documented at other Arctic and northern Eurasian sites, suggesting this was a widespread strategy across parts of the mammoth steppe. At Yana, researchers estimate accumulation at roughly 1 to 2 mammoths per year. Berelekh's chronology shows repeated procurement over centuries and may have had equal or higher rates. The pattern is human-driven, not a single catastrophe. If people were so efficient at harvesting mammoths, did human hunting deliver the final blow, or were environmental changes already closing the trap? The answer might surprise you, especially when you consider what scientists are planning to do about it. Harvard associated scientists and Colossal Biosciences, a Dallas-based private company, have announced they've created elephant cells carrying mammoth genes, marking a significant step toward their ambitious goal of producing a mammoth-elephant hybrid by 2028. Colossal has mapped out a 12-step plan using CRISPR gene editing technology and induced pluripotent stem cells. This isn't science fiction anymore, but the timeline and ultimate success remain company goals rather than delivered facts. The technical challenges seem almost impossible to overcome. Scientists must sequence ancient DNA from frozen Siberian remains, identify specific cold adaptive traits among thousands of genetic variations, build comprehensive CRISPR libraries for precise editing, and create viable embryos from heavily modified cells. Each step requires breakthrough technology that didn't exist just 5 years ago. The genetic modifications required are staggering in their complexity. Scientists need to edit genes for enhanced hemoglobin that can carry more oxygen in frigid temperatures, dense fur patterns that create insulating layers, fat distribution systems that provide Arctic survival energy, and behavioral adaptations that allow survival in harsh tundra conditions. Colossal and collaborators have discussed editing on the order of dozens of loci, with company literature mentioning approximately 60 to 65 key cold adaptive edits as a working figure. The breakthrough achievement involves creating elephant-induced pluripotent stem cells that can be edited with mammoth traits and potentially developed into functional embryos. And these stem cells act like blank genetic slates that scientists can reprogram with mammoth characteristics. The process continues with nuclear transfer, where the edited cell nucleus gets fused with an Asian elephant egg harvested from a healthy female donor. Asian elephants would serve as surrogate mothers, carrying these hybrid calves through a 22-month gestation period. The proposed ecological benefits include permafrost stabilization through grassland restoration, massive carbon sequestration, and ecosystem engineering that could help combat climate change by preventing methane release from thawing Arctic soil. Many scientists stress this would produce an elephant-mammoth hybrid and raise questions about surrogate welfare, ecological fitness, and whether the result would truly restore ancient ecosystems. The unprecedented nature of this experiment is raising concerns that critics warn could have dangerous unintended consequences. What happens when the first mammoth calf is born but refuses to integrate with elephant herds, or worse, carries genes that could accidentally spread to wild elephant populations through crossbreeding? Conservationists are raising serious ecological and ethical concerns about mammoth de-extinction, focusing on unintended consequences for existing species that could prove devastating for Arctic ecosystems and endangered elephant populations worldwide. The Ecological Society of America warns that de-extinguished species could become invasive or disrupt existing Arctic food chains in unpredictable ways. These ecosystems are complex networks where every species plays a specific role, and introducing a new large herbivore could trigger cascading effects that scientists cannot predict or control once they begin. The research identifies several concrete risks: unpredictability of ecosystem response when introducing species that have been absent for millennia, disease transmission risk to endangered elephant populations used as surrogates, genetic dilution through crossbreeding with wild elephants, and the opportunity cost of diverting conservation funds from protecting existing species. The surrogate mother issue raises particularly troubling ethical concerns. Using endangered Asian elephants as surrogates means subjecting them to 22-month gestations with historically low embryo survival rates in cloning attempts. The moral debate centers on whether it's acceptable to risk the welfare of already threatened elephant populations for experimental de-extinction projects. Proponents point to permafrost stabilization and albedo benefits from mammoth grazing, but peer-reviewed assessments and critics emphasize the uncertainty and that large-scale benefit would likely require massive numbers of animals and could produce unforeseen effects. The science remains unsettled on whether proxy mammoths would actually help combat climate change or potentially worsen it through summer grazing that disturbs permafrost and releases methane. Critics argue funds might better preserve endangered elephants, conserve habitat, or address immediate climate mitigation measures, a central unresolved policy question. No established protocols exist for removing or controlling de-extinguished species if they become problematic or fail to thrive. Would you rather spend millions bringing back proxies of lost giants or preventing living giants from disappearing? This question cuts to the heart of a deeper paradox about humanity's relationship with the natural world. The mammoth story reveals two linked truths about human impact on nature. Archaeological evidence shows humans heavily exploited mammoths at sites like Berelekh and across the Ice Age world. Whether that hunting pressure delivered the final blow varies by study, but our species clearly played a significant role in mammoth decline. Today, we have advanced tools to try restoring mammoth proxies through genetic engineering, but major scientific unknowns and ethical trade-offs remain unresolved. This raises one of the hardest questions in conservation ethics: can or should we use new biotechnologies to repair past losses, and at what cost? The same intelligence that helped drive mammoths toward extinction now promises resurrection through laboratory manipulation and surrogate elephant mothers. If a genetically engineered mammophant arrived tomorrow, would you call it a mammoth, an elephant, or something else? And would its return be a rescue or a risk vote in the comments funds for de-extinction or funds for protecting living elephants? Which would you choose?